Rome. That beacon of light in a dark, savage world. It still is, for some of us. After the split of our empire as enacted by Constantine himself, our esteemed Emperor Valentinianus does his best to keep the light of Rome alight. God knows he was given the harder job. His ally, Emperor Valens Flavius, residing in Constantinople, always was the lucky one in life. He was younger, perhaps even a bit handsomer, but most importantly, his Roman Empire was and remains mostly unified. Basking in the sun of the East, his people are for the most part followers of our new Christian faith. His tax base was secured and his governors ruled well. Not like here, where taxes are going uncollected and the pagans run rampant, commoner or general. Being a follower of Christ himself, Valentinianus had always wished for a Christian Italy, for the salvation of the true Roman heartlands. His was a goal of charity and kindness, which of course, the cost of which sometimes had to be paid in blood. The emperor saw his divine mandate as follows: to stabilize the Western Roman Empire, to bring public order under control, to bring value back to the sacred denarii and quench the most unholy hyperinflation, and most of all, to Christianize all of Italy. Lord knows extending God's reach to Gaul and beyond would be a most impossible task. Of course, nothing is impossible with Christ as one's shepherd. And so, Emperor Valentinianus said, only 7% of people watching this video are actually subscribed to the channel. If you enjoy my content guys, it would mean so much to me if you took the time to make a simple click and sub to the channel. It really goes a long way in helping my videos reach further, and hopefully helping you in knowing when there's new and exciting content to be enjoyed. I'd really appreciate it. Valentinianus knew his task would be difficult, but he would, at Christ as his witness, attempt to re-establish order in the empire before the Lord took him. The worst was the uncertainty. As the emperor and as Christ's missionary, he realized he was outnumbered by followers of the pagan ways, not just in the population at large, but among his most trusted men. His son, both in blood and faith, ruled in Tarentum to the south, but other than that, things looked grim. The vital cities of Ravenna and Mediolanum were fully pagan, and so were their governors. Gaul had barely even heard of Christ, and the same went for Iberia and, God forbid, Britannia. Carthage remained an important center of Christianity, no doubt, but seeing as the city was outside of the continent, it mattered little in terms of direct religious osmosis and influence. As it turned out, spreading the word of God could wait. When it came down to it, Valentinianus could do little for Christendom with empty pockets, and the state treasury was about to empty. Unable to field new legions or raise any buildings of importance, Valentinianus opted instead to send the legions to where they were needed most. Mediolanum could be saved in the long run, but cities like Salona, Carnuntum, and various Gallic cities and all of Iberia were likely out of reach in the short term, meaning close to 1/3 of the empire was in immediate danger of revolting. Tripolitania was completely abandoned, the garrison there sent to bolster Carthage. Meanwhile, Valentinianus ordered his governors to min-max taxation versus happiness as best they could, but there was little they could do on such short notice. Perhaps more concerning was the empire's diplomatic standing. It looked peaceful from the emperor's map room, sure. For the time being, not even his ally would share the geographical discoveries. And what's worse, various barbarian nations had settled right at the empire's borders. The Alemanni had been a thorn in the empire's side for a while now, and something had to be done about them. But perhaps the Franks could be convinced to remain cordial. A diplomatic envoy was sent, and sure enough, trade rights and peace between our peoples were secured, at least for the time being. Having secured the Frankian front, Valentinianus ordered the gathering of a northern army to deal with the Alemanni, led by none other than Marcus the Gambler, a Christian. But as soon as he'd given the order, news came in from the provinces. Mass revolts and civil disorder was rampant in both the west, north, and the south. And more than that, the state treasury was now completely empty. To save as many legionaries as possible, a new army was created in Gaul, led by the pagan Gnaeus Flavius, and armies were made to rendezvous in safer cities in Iberia. There was no time to lose if the emperor were to ensure internal as well as external stability. He ordered Marcus the Gambler into Germania to besiege Vicus Alemanni before reinforcements could arrive. The battle began well. Marcus took the walls faster than expected and dealt with the barbarian units one by one. He ordered his men into formation once firmly in the city and wreaked havoc on the defenders. The only problem remained the hillside and the two generals guarding the town center. Believing in his men, he thought they could withstand the might of the enemy cavalry, but the chosen warlord was more powerful than he thought. A number of men fled, run down by the horsemen. Marcus ordered a regroup on firmer ground, but the warlord followed. As if a miracle sent from heaven, the pagan general fell, presenting Marcus with a second chance of victory. But, severely lacking spearmen, a second unit of chosen warlords remained, now charging forward. In the chaos, Marcus himself fell to the sword of a warlord, sealing the battle's fate. His entire army scattered to the winds. This was but the first of Valentinianus' trials, as even worse news came in. In one fell swoop, conspirators and rebels hand in hand seized controls of entire provinces all around the empire. With nothing to show for it, nearly the entirety of Iberia and half of Gaul was suddenly out of imperial reach. Only Carthage remained in North Africa, and Carnuntum fell in Pannonia. And worse, Valentinianus' coffers were not only empty, but the empire was now mired in debt. The emperor would not be able to purchase his favorite bonbons anytime soon. One thing was certain: the Lord was testing him. He gathered his armies in Iberia and ordered a full counteroffensive, besieging Carthago Nova with the remnants of the garrison there. From Augusta Vindelicorum, the young Gratianus the Lily-Covered, the emperor's most trusted man, also a Christian, formed a new army, ready to undo the blunder at Vicus Alemanni. And in Gaul, Gnaeus Flavius besieged Avaricum. It was a nice day for a siege, everything accounted for, but his cavalry-based army demanded that the infantry take either the gates or the walls first. The battering ram was set ablaze soon, and even though the siege tower reached the walls, rebel reinforcements arrived from the east. Gnaeus chose to regroup. By splitting his army in two, he forced the incoming forces to divide as well, severely diminishing their charging power.
Great gods be praised! The enemy general is killed! Fear makes a home in our enemies' hearts!
With the reinforcing general gone, his remaining forces soon fled. With the gates back in imperial hands, it was time to fight in the streets. Avaricum was retaken, the emperor's policy of exterminating traitors adhered to, and Gnaeus Flavius' career as a general in Gaul would be watched with great interest. And as such, he was immediately ordered to retake Burdigala with his remaining forces. Without delay, he attacked the forces stationed outside the city, once more forced to fight two armies at once. But Gnaeus Flavius, a pagan, took delight in fighting the Christian pretend emperor, Gaius. He dealt with the first army quickly. The second army was no different.
The gods have filled the heart of the enemy general with fear. Now he flees the field like a coward. King lies dead at your feet.
Gnaeus had once more completely destroyed the enemy, and only a season after losing it, Burdigala was back in the Roman fold. Gaul had been reconquered. The same story came out of Iberia, where the rightful governor of Cordoba retook his city. The rebel assault had been stopped in its tracks, but not eradicated just yet. In Germania, it was time for the emperor's man Gratianus to prove his worth. He moved during the winter of 365, attacking not only the Alemanni general Camberius, but the prince himself, also named Camberius. It was cold that day. A snowstorm threatened to delay plans, but Gratianus held firm. He moved his troops into a nearby forest and awaited the enemy.
General is killed! Fear makes a home in our enemies' hearts!
By day's end, both Camberiuses were vanquished, and Vicus Alemanni laid open. For the first time in forever, the empire expanded into German lands. sword first. Of course, the emperor demanded more of Gratianus. From their city in Carnuntum, the rebel conspirators sent armies towards the Alps. If they were able to make headway, Mediolanum and all of Italy could be in danger. Gratianus had to move fast. He left Vicus Alemanni at first opportunity and rendezvoused with fresh troops from Italy. But war was not the only business of the day. As a man of Christ, Emperor Valentinianus saw the value in peace and friendship. A diplomat was sent further into Germany than ever before, when our man in the north, Magnus, encountered the Burgundy peoples. He negotiated trade and an exchange of maps for a lump sum of gold no less, in an action that could have ramifications for the empire's safety for years to come. In a complete surprise, the Alemanni realized they were outnumbered and surrounded. An envoy of theirs made it to Spurius Flavius, and in fact asked to become a subject of the empire. With no desire to take the war further, Valentinianus agreed, securing the border once and for all. Of course, this was in the north, but the empire's southern border was a different matter. Out of nowhere, the Berbers marched on Carthage. Only a small garrison remained in the city, but Roman walls showed their worth. Our defenses alone tore away the sieging ability of the Berbers, sending them away in flight. Cordoba too was laid siege to, this time by rebels, and not just once, but twice over. Also in Iberia, General Publius Flavius believed it was time to retake Carthago Nova. It proved to be a tough job. Despite preparing a number of battering rams, all of them were set ablaze. Only the tower reached the walls, incurring heavy losses on our troops. By the end of it, the city fell nonetheless, and now, only one rebel city remained on the peninsula. With much needed money coming into the treasury, Valentinianus had almost turned the economy around. With his current funds, he elected to kickstart his Christianization, although some choices could have been made wiser. It was perhaps an easy decision to raise a church in Caralis, but thinking twice before raising the Temple of Mithras in Avaricum would have been smart. Instead, Valentinianus ordered it to be replaced by a church, which the local population, newly liberated, did not receive well. Gnaeus, once again, had to move north with his army. Despite the pagan discontent, Valentinianus felt confident now, on the offensive, at least in part. He ordered Gratianus forward towards rebels in the Alps, even under the cover of night. Traitors deserved no better. Gratianus the lily-covered lived for both battle and for lilies, and the victory brought him ever closer to Carnuntum, which he laid siege to. And shortly after, Cordoba was relieved by the advance of Publius Flavius, who rode in haste from Carthago Nova. It was clear by now that Carthage was at risk of being invaded again. Not only had the Berbers proven their willingness to attack, but the Roman rebels did control Tripolitania after all. It was therefore decided that Admiral Titus was to transport Decimus Flavius from Caralis to Carthage, so that a proper Christian governor could oversee the defenses. In Germania, Magnus continued his charm offensive, sealing a beneficial trade agreement with the Lombardy. But uncertainty awaited on the horizon, as Roman watchtowers spotted an army from an unknown faction. The Roman scouts referred to them by one name, the Saxons. In a most surprising and despicable turn of events, the Eastern Empire decided to end the sacred alliance between us. For what reason remained unknown, but the Greeks must have abandoned reason for madness Valentinianus swore. No matter, he thought. The West was all that mattered now. All over the empire, battles for the soul of Rome continued. In Iberia, Publius ambushed a rebel force north of Cordoba. And in Gaul, Gnaeus was adamant to take Avaricum as soon as possible, not even flinching when the rebel garrison sallied out against him. And finally, the situation had been turned around. All debts were paid and the treasury steadily filling up. Infrastructure was ordered built in Italy, and repairs to Carthaginian churches and baths were paid in full. The emperor even dared to tear down the old temple in Syracuse and replace it with the church. A renegotiated alliance with the Eastern Empire was out of the question, but a sharing of maps was always wise, and from it, we learned that the fools had lost Syria to the Sassanids, and that they too were dealing with rebels. Valentinianus couldn't help but smile at his former brother's plight, but his skadefryd was soon interrupted by a messenger from the furthest reaches of the empire. Up until now, Britannia had been a fairly quiet place, but the Celts had other plans. They laid siege to Eberacum with an army 3 times the size of the city garrison. Something had to be done if the march of barbarians were to be stopped. A relief force was dispatched from Londinium, reaching the city just in time before the assault began. Despite being heavily outnumbered and facing elite Celtic units, the Grand General of Britannia, Placcus the Horseman, devised a strategy. He began by stationing his units by the walls, hammering the enemy with pila as they approached. But their sheer number would soon overrun them, and so Placcus ordered them back to the city center, in tight formation. The Celts would soon realize what facing a Roman army, no matter how small, actually meant.
The enemy general is slain, and now his men fear us. It is time to press the attack!
And Placcus had saved the day. Another important battle took place that same winter. In Carnuntum, the rebel garrison was forced to attack Galvinius before supplies ran out. It ended as it had to, of course, as a meat grinder, Roman Christian style.
General is slain.
With that, Galvinius had completed the mission the Emperor had set him out to do, to secure the northern border once more, and to exterminate any rebel sympathizers in his path. Money now poured into the imperial coffers. Farms and mines and new barracks were finally built in Iberia, a Christian shrine was ordered raised in Carnuntum, in the first actual strategic attempt to bring God's word to non-Italian lands. And Valentinianus himself could finally prepare for something special when he recruited elite comitatensis units in Rome itself. As fate would have it, Gnaeus Flavius would once again have to leave his laurels, as he was needed north, where the city of Colonia Agrippina was about to revolt against the local Christian governor Nero Flavius, who found himself in deep pagan waters. And yes, if you haven't noticed yet, Flavius is a damn common name in this bit. But any support from the city garrison itself was soon shattered, as Nero elected instead to join the rebels. This betrayal ran deep for Valentinianus, coming from a fellow Christian no less. Having Gnaeus do his business for him in Gaul, all the while bad news came in from Britannia, the emperor needed to put his mind elsewhere. For the first time in years, Valentinianus decided to stretch his legs. He took a small army north, defeating a rebel army in his way, and moved for Ravenna. He ordered the former governor north, and shortly after, tore down the great temple there, erecting a church instead, relying on his gravitas and military presence to keep the plebs from revolting. Once there, however, messengers arrived from both north and south. In Britannia, Placcus once again drove off a large Celtic force, securing Hadrian's Wall for another day. But grim words arrived from Carthage. The Berbers, once driven off by the sheer ingenuity of Roman walls, had now returned in force. The battle took place at night. Beautiful stars twinkled over the North African province, but they offered no warmth. Once again, we succeeded at setting their battering ram alight, but this time, their siege tower reached the walls. Our men awaited. Against all odds and forcing our generals to ask themselves what the heck these Africans were on, their axemen fought bravely, never surrendering even when down to only a handful of men. Once reinforcements came, the fate of our men was sealed. The cavalry retreated to the inner city, knowing they were in the final moments of their lives. They took the enemy general with them into the afterlife, but the Berbers kept on fighting. And that day, Carthage, once the very symbol of Roman perseverance and fighting spirit, along with all of Roman North Africa, had fallen. From a Syracuse which had just been retaken from pagan rebels, an army was sent across the sea, but an act of God sent a storm their way, ending the life of the commanding general and forcing the fleet to sail to Corrales instead. In Iberia, Publius was on the move. He received special dispensation from the emperor himself to recruit Iberian mercenaries, some of which were former veterans of the Roman army. Alongside them, he marched towards the remaining rebels, fighting them head-on in the fields outside Salamanca. At last, taking the city was within our grasp. In the north, Gnaeus discovered a hidden rebel army outside Colonia Agrippina, requiring the aid of Caius Flavius from the nearby city to aid him. And even further north, another special dispensation was made when the Celts sent one last army towards Hadrian's Wall. Placius marched from Londinium where a Saxon army had landed, and recruited a unit of Graal knights, perhaps the most elite horsemen in the entire empire. But to be of any use, Placius had to go on the offensive. He forced the Celts to engage in a field battle, making sure to link up with the rest of the army first. But this was an elite army of Celts, carrying two-handed swords and wearing heavy armor. This battle required more than brawn. It demanded Placius' famous tactical genius. He spread his forces, sending the bulk of the army forward, all the while splitting his cavalry in first 2, then 3 sections. This forced the Celts to do the same lest they be flanked, but their men could not run as fast as horses could gallop. By keeping the main force busy at the front, he charged his heavy Graal knights into the rear infantry, but instead of fighting, he ordered them right through. In a pincer movement hitherto unseen, he cornered the enemy general in the open, leading the charge himself.
Be praised! The enemy general is dead! His men know their doom approaches!
What the Celts saw as an unquestionable victory had turned into a strategic defeat. So damaging was this loss that they soon saw the necessity to sue for peace. More good news came from Gaul when the iconic duo of Gnaeus and Gaius proved to Nero, all of them named Flavius by the way, that rebelling was not an option. Nero would have known this if he had read the fine print. The agreement with the Celts and the victory in Gaul came just in time as well, for the Saxons had no intention of remaining on good terms. They sieged Londinium, again forcing Placius to ride back, driving them back into the ocean. More than just seeing its fair share of victories, the year 373 proved Emperor Valentinianus' mastery of diplomacy and leadership in war. His scouts reported that a new horde had arrived in Dacia, a people known as the Huns. These Huns were warring with the Eastern Empire and looked quite nasty to boot. So what better way to secure his people than to ally them and ensure the lasting of peace? What's more, Valentinianus accepted a Vandal offer of submission, placing vast tracts of land under effective Roman protection, and even made peace with the newly arrived Saxons, for surely they could not suffer another shameful defeat. And finally, Iberia was once again made whole when Publius, after a long war, at long last retook Salamanca. Imagine it for a moment, if you would. 10 years of war had not all but secured internal imperial peace, at the very least shored up public order, but made subjects and partners of former rivals. Now, the real work could begin. With his coffers overflowing and borders secured, Valentinianus shifted his sights to Italy. In celebration of the reconquest of Iberia, he commissioned the construction of a great Christian basilica in Rome, and further, a church in Ravenna. But more was underway. He now ordered Aulus Flavius even further north and replaced him as governor. Again he tore down the temple of Mithras and raised a shrine to Christ. What followed was, despite some discontent over the tearing down of pagan temples, years of peace. To shore up defenses, Gnaeus moved north and erected fortifications at the Saxon border. General Spurius did the same in the east, hoping to stave off possible invasions. And finally, as Roman watchmen saw Burgundian hordes move in from the north, legendary General Galvinius did the same, fortifying Pannonia as best he could. A few adoptions were made as well. Aurelius, a promising Christian, was adopted to Aulus, a pagan. Another Christian, Appius, was then adopted to Gnaeus, another pagan, both by order of the emperor. He chuckled when he heard the news from the east, that the Huns were at the gates of Constantinople. Perhaps he chuckled too soon, for not only had the faraway Sassanids made martyrs out of his fellow believers, but a plague stalked the lands of Mediolanum while he himself was stationed there. forcing him to move to safety outside the city. And then, one day, a foul message arrived from the Berbers. A head, wrapped in a towel, fell on the floor of his quarters. The Berbers, having defeated the remnants of the Roman rebels in Tripolitania, did not mince words, did not even use words. This was a threat for the Romans never to return to Africa. But despite having no love for the rebels he had spent a decade fighting, Valentinianus reacted with rage.
You are enemies.
He was a consul of Rome!
Only a Roman could kill a Roman, he yelled. This offense would not go unpunished, he swore. But for now, Valentinianus had achieved what he swore he would accomplish. Despite losing Africa, the continent, whether in Gaul or Iberia, was secured. The empire was reunited, enemies made peace with or subjugated entirely, public law and order restored, the value of the Roman coin reaffirmed and treasuries filled, and most important of all, with the completion of the Great Basilica in Rome, every Italian city and province now followed the teachings of Christendom. The Western Roman Empire had been tamed and strengthened, for now at least. My friends, playing this campaign is an absolute joy so far. I don't think I've ever played this far and this successful with the Western Roman Empire before, but even though we're doing well, I guess we haven't really met the full might of the hordes yet. But that's perhaps for another time, if you enjoyed this video. And as always, please remember to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.